This story may not be for everyone. I wrote it on the behalf of a friend who hoped it would help in a small way those facing the same awful situation. It is called A Rock Around the Clock. For God's sake, when are you going to say something? Bitter and impatient, her tone demanded an immediate response. He looked down at the pavement, then across the road, and then over the river, anywhere but at his partner walking beside him. Even if he could think of a reply, he knew he couldn't speak. His thoughts were as paralyzed as his mouth. He was shocked stupid. Her sobbing was ripping holes in his heart. He put a despairing arm around her, knowing it would not help. Nothing could help. Misery was king. Tightly, in the car, he held her hand as they quietly wept. A traffic warden approached. A glance at their faces, and he hurried past, stuffing his ticket machine back in his pouch, as he so often did outside the hospital. "We will be using the big guns," said the doctor, and his look was not reassuring. She knew several of her friends had had this treatment, but not so intensely and not for so long, or with the hint of more to follow after 6 months. It was summer. Across the road from the hospital, the Chelsea Flower Show blossomed. People were laughing, clinking glasses, and winning medals. The contrast increased her bitterness, knowing she had been chosen to sit on the outside and compare fates. They realized their first month of treatment would be one of watching and waiting as the drugs invaded and changed her life. She succumbed quickly to stomach cramp, dizziness, and the start of her voyage under the lengthening shadow of nausea, and with exhaustion, total and numbing, that over the coming months would limit her days, hours, and movement. He was surprised by the new and steep learning curve that over the first 30 days he had to scramble up. He polished a talent for deception, assuring her she looked great as her healthy pink faded under a deepening pallor as her treatment bit. He learned also to absorb the shock reaction of family and friends, accepting that some would be overbearing and stifling in their sincerity, and others, unable to disguise their looks of panic, would cut all contact. As the monthly routine started and they settled into their forced regime, they then realized, to their horror, they were locked into a cruel timetable. Throughout the first week after the treatment, she would be barely able to move, vomiting and gasping the hours away. The second week would be less awful, allowing her time to take note of her condition and explore the depths of her despair. The third week would see an improvement, and a few brief hours away from the battlefield before the start of the fourth week. She felt better, much better, but also much more open to the implications of the following Monday and her date with her disgusting chemicals, followed by the slam back into her dark, painful semi-world. Their Monday morning journey to the hospital would pass in silence, any words useless, until his arm of support was replaced by that of the nurses, leaving him to return alone, convinced he had delivered his partner to the gates of hell. He devised new strategies, where to best place bowls and fresh towels, when to close windows before the damp started her cough, how to stop the odours she could no longer tolerate. The smell of coffee and toast, her favourite start to the day, now precipitated her crawl to the bathroom. The cooking of cabbage and broccoli was banned, as the smell reignited the memories of the hospital after her operation. Marmalade was a particular horror. The yellow jar was a beacon, the first thing she saw on her tray in the morning after treatment, reminding her it was the start of a new month of her cycle of anguish. He learned to stay silent when she apportioned the blame for her illness and to sympathize. When sympathy was impossible, as the first few loose hairs on her pillow became strands, the strands to clumps, and the clumps to handful, until the pillow remained as bare as the head that rested upon it. They laughed at her wig, parking it on the stair post and talking to it as they passed. It was now a new member of the family, but the laughing was exhausting, and she soon fell back, white and thin, onto the bed. She found the slightest noise an irritation, and the irritations became crises that amplified themselves in her imagination as it gorged itself upon the dark fantasies that were magnified by her powerful drugs. The woman he had met at a party 15 years ago had gone. Where she laughed, she now cried. She replaced compliments with complaints, telling him the world had stopped when the surgeon had lifted the X-ray plates. But he had to be strong. Despite his forced smiles and energy-draining attempts at frivolity, he realized he was just a pale shadow, and his strength quite minuscule when compared to the energy his partner expanded on the raging battle she conducted each hour. He became her rock, ready to be gripped and held when times became too tough for her to fight alone, and smiled resolution and confidence even though his heart was falling through the floor as he watched her weaken. Conscientious with family and friends, offering progress reports where there was none, reassuring those closest with regular telephone calls, trying to appear light and in control, he would then readjust his mask as he put down the telephone and faced reality. How much longer could he watch her fade? His question was answered on the following Monday. She could not take any further treatment. Her chemical cocktail was replaced with purifying blood transfusion, and she came out of hospital pink and bright, with sufficient energy to smile a weak smile. He refused to consider that she might lose her battle, although the dark hours when he was alone, time and shadows united with doubt to rip away his resolve. His relentless logic concluding that if the worst happened, then when it happened would be the time to think about it. Of course, he asked for her chances, but the doctor's steady stare in reply to his question could not have been more ambiguous. They were alone, and there could be no promises. Her treatment resumed for another month, but again, on the 5th month, a halt was called. Her body could not take further battering, and neither could her mind. He argued with her for 2 weeks to resume the treatment, 2 weeks in which he played every trick, resorted to the lowest cunning, and delivered the direst threats to get her back to the hospital. Half dragging, half carrying, he delivered her to the waiting team. The experienced professionals demolished her resistance, and after an hour of deep thought, she swung her legs back onto the treatment bed. 7 grim months, and now it seemed fitting in the middle of winter, she walked slowly from the ward, for the first time elated. At last her name was now missing from the treatment list. But the big guns were not finished, and as hinted, her new treatment started. Now the poisoning had stopped. The burning could begin. He watched anxiously for the first few days, a little redness, a little discomfort, but nothing as savage as the attack of the injections. Indeed, after a fortnight, it was obvious from the spring in her step, her daily visit to the hospital had become subservient to her tour of the supermarket. She seemed to feed on the radiation, her weight increasing, her energy multiplying, and the stubble on her head regaining more of its flowing form. Her quarterly checks faded from anxious, nerve-wracking tests to routine chats. The surgeon continued to boast of the beauty of her scar, and even her oncologist, the monster who had broken the terrible news months earlier, was less of the grim deliverer and allowed the three of them to smile. He watched with astonishment at the change. It seemed that as fast as her treatment had knocked her over, her health had now almost obscenely improved as she blistered a path back to recovery. He now coughed and spluttered through the winter, ached through the summer, and complained of fatigue throughout the autumn, while she sailed over the seasons and viruses. Friends who had vanished returned behind bouquets of flowers, although he noted her coolness with those who had cut all contact. Life outside of the house and the hospital was tested, and their habits resumed their former routine. But now she insisted on running her hands over her body every morning for reassurance, donating as much as she could afford to the Pink Ribbon, and when friends and relatives became ill, she would use her experience and move into action. As she threw off the effects of the treatment and slowly returned to the woman he knew, his invisible scars healed also. And 5 years later, with their life bounding forward, he still, in moments of quiet, marveled, not at the skill and dedication of the doctors and hospitals, or at the discovery of the drugs and treatments, not at the help and support he received from friends and often from complete strangers. He marveled at how he came through it. From where did he get his strength? What drove him on? Was it out of duty? Was it out of fear? Or out of anger? But duty can be done, fear overcome, and anger always abates. It was, he knew, something far, far deeper. As their battle had escalated, a conviction that fed not on hope or on faith or on encouragement took hold. It seemed the worse and the more hopeless things became, the stronger he fought with her, matching the awfulness with a strength he knew he did not possess. He had learnt from his personal disaster, and he had learnt well, that if it was wanted, if it were needed, love was without doubt inexhaustible. And he knew she felt the same.